I was rereading an essay that you wrote for Shondaland recently, and you wrote that it's hard to reflect back on the time before your MS diagnosis and the person you were, but I'm hoping we can go back in time and you can tell me a little bit about that person and specifically what were her dreams of motherhood and how did she imagine being pregnant and having babies?
I think MS or not, anyone's kind of dream of motherhood and what your expectations are always different than what the reality is. I mean, no matter what anyone can try to tell you about motherhood, you're not prepared for it. Your instincts are more than you think, but like mentally what you think the picture of motherhood is going to be completely different. My entire life looks different than obviously I ever imagined it to be. But with that being said, I actually don't know if I would be the person and mother I am proud to be right now without it. I think we all are given something in our life to push us and make us grow, and MS happens to be my thing. I grew up in musical theater. I was a dancer, a performer, and so much of my instrument is my body. My instrument is myself, and to have something come into play that gets in the way of that freedom and that artistic expression has been really hard and has been really something that I've had to deal with. And then when it comes to motherhood, the way it limits me and limits what I can and cannot do with my children. Specifically, I have two very active little boys, having to hand the baton over to a nanny or a friend to do a specific activity that they want to do because I can't, has been hard. I mean, it never gets easier. It's, I want to be their everything. I want to be the person that does everything with them, and to see them off running, smiling, and having fun with somebody else because I physically can't do it is not ideal. And it breaks my heart each and every time. But I also have to, it's kind of what happens when you become a mom is, you put their feelings before your own, and I have to stop projecting my own feelings onto them. I can't keep them from doing things just because I want to be the one that does it with them. So I think there's been a lot of extra lessons in motherhood than maybe if I didn't have the MS.
And let's talk specifically about pregnancy. So when you got your diagnosis, what were you told about getting pregnant, carrying children?
Well, actually, that was one of the positive conversations I had when I was diagnosed, was that you can absolutely carry and you can absolutely have a very healthy pregnancy, healthy delivery. And in fact, a lot of women feel better during pregnancy. And during my first pregnancy, that was the case. I initially was also concerned about conceiving, I think because of the amount of medications I've been on, the rounds of steroids I've taken over the, 11, 12 years prior to me getting pregnant the first time. You never know. You don't know how your body's going to react. You don't know what's going to be the case. And fortunately for me, I got pregnant very quickly. And then during my first pregnancy, I was taking longer walks than I had in years. I was, up and down our street. We lived in the hills in Los Angeles with my dog. It was a glorious time. It was also a time where, because I was still hiding the fact that I had MS, and I had had some gait issues, a little bit of a limp, all of a sudden, people weren't questioning what was wrong with my walking because I was waddling because I was pregnant. So I just felt this opportunity to kind of relax, not feel so self-conscious, not feel like I had to come up with a story all the time about what was going on with me. It became a time where I was kind of let off the hook, I guess, with all of my insecurities and all of my stories that I always had to create in the public.
It's so interesting because I talk to so many women who feel the opposite, like they get pregnant and suddenly they feel like they're on display, but it sounds like it was almost like a liberating time for you.
It was. And then even people, wanting to, when you're pregnant, everybody wants to help you. They hold the door, they put their hand out to help you move and walk. And normally, because of the MS, I would appreciate the gesture, but I would almost get upset about it, that I had to have this help, that that people felt like they needed to take care of me. And during the pregnancy, again, it was another moment where I was like, oh, this happens to all pregnant women. So I'm going to invite this now. It doesn't feel extra. It doesn't feel like I'm this special person. So yeah, those were things that I enjoyed.
That's such a beautiful thing to feel on top of being pregnant. That's really special. You said it was about 11 years between your diagnosis and when you got pregnant. When did you start to think seriously about trying to get pregnant and start a family? Was it right when you met Cutter? Was it soon after?
Yeah, I think meeting him, we got pregnant 9 months after meeting. And again, we weren't trying to get pregnant. It was an accident, but he loved every version of me. And he was the first guy where I felt like I could be the happy-go-lucky, positive fighter, Jamie, and also the depressed, angry, why me, Jamie? I had all of those moments, and he loved me through all of that. And so that was like, this is the guy that's going to make me feel safe to navigate my journey with this disease and just my journey in life. And so, whatever you believe, I think that the universe kind of stepped in and got me pregnant as quickly as we did in our relationship because he's 8 years younger than me. I think I would have talked myself out of, but this can't work because he's so young. Like I'm 30, he's 22. So I always look at it as the universe stepped in and was like, you're going to stay with this guy. And this is your partner.
I love that. Okay. So tell me about the moment you found out you were pregnant. Since it was an accident, was it shocking, surprising?
Shocking, completely shocking, surprising. But two of my best friends, one of them being Joanna Garcia Swisher, was also pregnant at the same time. So it was just like, it was shocking, but then also like, this is a dream. This is what I've always wanted, was to like go through this with my best friends. And I remember Cutter being almost more excited than I was. And it was this moment of feeling really appreciative of my body, which had been a really long time since I'd felt that. I was just really appreciative that it was like working and healthy. And it was something to look forward to. I think because I was also keeping the MS a secret, life just felt like a really big extra fight. And it was something where like, okay, this is a new phase in my life. I don't know what's to come, but I'm excited. I was excited again for the first time in a long time.
That's really beautiful. So I also read somewhere that you wrote, despite this excitement and all those positive feelings, that you were a little bit terrified about motherhood. Can you tell me why that was?
Well, I think, as the pregnancy progressed and I think as the reality of what was to come started to settle in, I started to, envision all the things of motherhood, of, running down the beach with my child or, at the park. And I started to have these fears of, what if he runs away and I can't catch him? What if he needs something and I can't physically be fast enough to help him? Just the idea that I couldn't be the one to protect my child in certain situations started to get really scary. I didn't live with them for long in the sense of like just on my own. I really started to verbalize them, especially to Cutter, and just, having his support and just talking it out really helped. I think all mothers kind of have these fears, but for me, just feeling like I couldn't be his everything was heartbreaking. But then when he got here, especially, there's a reason Beau was my firstborn. He's like, all he ever wants to do is take care of me. And he's been that way since day one. And so just knowing that like he would completely understand, like, hey, buddy, mommy needs to sit down for a while. He would shift and be like, okay, let's play Legos. Like he taught me that my disability didn't have to take away from our relationship. He really would adjust and shift still to this day with me in any way that I need. My little one, Jack, is not so much like that, but that's why I say there's a reason Beau was my first, because he taught me to kind of have more acceptance, even myself, for what my situation was.
Wow.
But it really, like I said, it only came gradually as life went on, of realizing like, okay, yeah, I couldn't take him in that hike with his class and his friends, and I couldn't be the mom to go with the class. But when he came back, he was excited to tell me all about it. and we were still able to do our special things together.
God, there's really a common thread here of you being like given the men, the boys in your life that you needed and that were right for you. It's really special. So tell me about, it sounded like your pregnancy physically was good, emotionally, because you were able to verbalize these things and kind of talk it out. You were feeling good. At what point did you start to think about your birth plan and your preferences and what that would all look like?
I had the best OB in the world. Her name is Suzanne Gilbert-Lenz, and she is my rock star. And she's the only reason I think that I was able to have the confidence to have vaginal birth, because throughout it all, she was like, you've got this. I've had other patients with MS. There's no reason to think you can't do this. I was induced at 40 weeks because he was a very big baby and my cervix wasn't moving. And, the labor was about 36 hours, and I pushed maybe for 3 hours. And I remember about halfway through, I looked at her and I was like, if I'm not doing this right, if I'm not strong enough, like, you need to tell me. I'm not here to be like, I want to do this right. And I remember she looked at me and she's like, you're doing everything every other woman does. Like, you've got this. And again, if it wasn't for her, I don't think I would have had the confidence, because I think, when you live with something with MS, sometimes you limit yourself beyond maybe what your limits even are, because you just assume you can't do things. So sometimes it takes an extra voice or an extra person to give you that push. And she was that person for me.
You said she had worked with other women who had MS and was experienced in this. How does MS sometimes affect birth plans? And did you feel like, was there pressure, or did you read about things when you Googled, like, maybe you shouldn't try a natural vaginal birth and maybe you won't be able to handle it? And how did you sort of grapple with those two sides of it?
I actually never researched anything with MS because I always feel like it's going to scare me. But, I have weaknesses. I have coordination issues. I don't have sensation in certain areas, particularly in like your like private area. There's like a lot of dysfunction there. And so I was worried about like being able to connect, to push properly, anything like that. MS is such a crapshoot, and you never know like when it's going to affect you a certain way or how it's going to affect you, and particularly during pregnancy and how I got bigger. I just wasn't sure. And so having her kind of cheerlead me through it all and be like, you're stronger than you think, you've got this, you normally in MS, one of the first things it takes away is your core and your core muscles and your connection to your core muscles. So then again, put on top of that, like a 10-pound baby in your belly, I just assumed I didn't have any control or any sense of anything there. But she made it more about it being like envisioning and mentally and almost spiritually. I remember she just kept saying, like, push him to the light, like push him out into this world. Don't even think about your body. Just close your eyes and think of him and what's about to happen. It was an experience that went beyond MS. And it was more about, you're a mother and this is your baby. Like, he doesn't know what's going on and your body doesn't know that. Like, this is a very natural experience. And it was an opportunity for me to feel normal.
Wow, I love that. So what was it like when you were pushing for those 3 hours? How did you feel? Like, did you feel the strongest you've ever felt?
Yeah, I get really in very high like energy or stressful situations. I get eerily calm. My husband was not. He was like in a corner, like hyperventilating. And I had my best friends all around me for both my births. So I had 2 best friends on each side holding my legs. My mom was at the foot of the bed. Cutter was behind me in the corner. And so we had music playing. We were trying to keep laughing. And I just kept listening to my doctor's voice and stayed super calm. And it was the same in my second.
It sounds like a party.
It
not
was
a labor and delivery.
It was. We really tried to keep it as light and fun as possible. And like I said, if there's any big emergency, like I'm the one you want around to calm you down.
That's so interesting. Okay, so I need to know more about Cutter, who's in the corner hyperventilating. Was he nervous, anxious? Does he not do well with like medical situations? What was going through his head?
I asked him later, and it's just me. He's always just so worried about me. He was just worried that I was going to be okay. And he internalizes it so much to the point where like he can't take it and has to kind of turn away. It honestly became a joke after a while where my doctor was like, do we need to get Cutter an oxygen mask? Like, do we need to get him a chair? You know, he's just that guy. He didn't cut either of my kids' umbilical cords, but all my friends did it. Like, he's just that guy that's just, until he knows everybody's safe, he can't relax.
It's kind of sweet, actually. It's really sweet. Okay, so tell me, Beau comes out. Do they hand him right to you? What happens in that moment?
Handed him right to me, put him on my chest. And immediately, like, I knew him. It was just one of the most obviously magical moments of your life, meeting your first child for the first time.
Do you remember what you said to him the very first
I just said, hey, like, how are you? It's me. I'm so happy you're here. Just kind of had that conversation. Beau felt really familiar. Like, I've known him a million lifetimes. And Jack felt like this brand new guy that I was meeting for the very first time. It's really an out of body experience. Like, everything goes away. I've never had that in my life where you're just so hyper-focusedly present as to when both my kids were put on my chest.
Wow. So you knew you were having a boy with Beau, is that right?
Yeah.
And did you know his name before going into the hospital?
We had our top three. Which is, want to hear a funny story. One of our top threes was the name Axel, and Fergie gave birth the same exact time as me and named their kid Axel. So it's a good thing we didn't name him, or how weird would that have been?
Oh, how funny.
Because my husband was like, oh, I just saw Josh Duhamel in the elevator. Like, the dad's like going up back to the maternity ward.
So literally in the same hospital on the same day.
Yeah.
Oh, that is so funny. That's great. And how did you choose the name Beau?
He was just Beau. I mean, we wanted to honor my husband's Southern roots. We wanted like a strong male Southern name. And we just both loved the name Beau. We kept coming back to it. It was our number one. Then we also liked the name Bodhi, but and then when we met him, his sweet little face, we just knew. I mean, obviously he can decide later in life. He actually says right now he wishes his name was Oliver for whatever reason. But I'm like, great. When you're 18, you can change it if you want. But to me, he's Beau.
For now, he's Beau. So you've talked a lot about the idea of control and how it manifests itself in your life. First, as someone who suffered from disordered eating. And then you've said a lot of people who have MS are very focused on what they can control at certain times. So how did you balance that sort of lack of control that comes with pregnancy and labor and delivery and then motherhood with, these are all things that often you have to be out of control.
Yeah. Well, I think motherhood loosened me up a bit with my control issues for sure, because you can prepare as much as you can. You can have everything packed in your diaper bag. You can feel like you are like a warrior walking out that door, that you're ready for any situation, and something happens and you don't have the right thing for it. You don't know the right way to calm your baby down, or what he exactly needs. And I think that it really just gave me a hard lesson in surrender and in sort of the beauty of that, and kind of just understanding that sometimes I don't have the answers, and sometimes we're also not going to always be our best, and we're able to be forgiven for that. I think through all the stages, with him as an infant, then to him being a toddler, there was just it was him and I for a lot of it, just us, because Cutter was still playing baseball. So, a lot of the times it was months at a time where it was just Beau and I, and, we really grew up together and figured it out together, and kind of, releasing my control about sleep and this because of all the travel we had to do. We both became a lot, looser in our ways. And I think that it's benefited me for sure.
I love that. That's interesting. So one of the women I spoke to for this podcast was Shawn Johnson-East, the Olympic gymnast, who's been really open about eating disorders and abusing her body, and how pregnancy kind of brought those all to the surface. Did it bring you back? Did you have to kind of go back to your therapy or thinking about how to think about disordered eating when you got pregnant?
I don't know if it's because of MS or not, because I know, when I suffered from an eating disorder, it was tragic and dark, and I didn't see a way out of it. But I have never felt any of those feelings again about my body. Even when I've gained weight, lost weight, I look at my body differently now. To me, more it's about its ability than what it looks like. I appreciate it more and I focus on it more for health reasons. And I think it's because of the MS that I just don't think about the eating stuff. I don't really I don't think twice. I don't shame myself if I've eaten too much. I don't obsess about eating too little. Honestly, after having my second baby, I got in the best shape of my life. I don't know if my hormones changed or whatever, but I think my focus is more on just being healthy and well for them and for me and what I want to do with my life, that I've fortunately been able to kind of release any body insecurities about its shape,
So I know you loved your OB. Did you also have a doula? Did I hear a crazy story about how you met your doula?
Yes, we met at a game show.
So I want to hear this.
Yes.
What is wilder than that? I want to hear.
I was 8 months pregnant, and there was this game show called Hollywood Game Night, and there'd be 2 contestants and then 3 celebrities that would help them. And she was the contestant that I was teamed up with. And obviously I was very pregnant. She's like, I'm a doula. And I was like, give me your number. And I just really loved her vibe. And I thought she was really sweet. And yeah, so we stayed in touch up until I gave birth. She was long distance, but she kind of coached me through a lot of the, I think she was more about really explaining the process of birth and what was happening and all the benefits. And so I think having that information and understanding what was physiologically happening and all of that, in those moments of fear and stress, just knowing all of those things was really helpful. But I didn't have a doula in the room with us.
Got it. You just had your best friends, your mom and your husband and your great OB at that party. So I want to hear more about, you said there was music. Do you remember what the playlist was? What were you listening to?
A lot of 80s music, because that's my favorite. Beau was born to a Guns N' Roses song.
Were there tears from you, from Cutter?
Oh, yeah, of course. Always tears. I think just also, just so grateful that he was here and he was healthy and that I was okay. And just grateful, too, to see the same people around my bed. That's, I think as you get older, your tribe becomes smaller but tighter. And I'm learning to appreciate the people that I love and love me a whole lot more. And just knowing that I had them there through this is amazing.
What were the few days after Beau was born? What was that like for you? Specifically, how did your body respond? Were you still kind of feeling that superhuman strength and ability to do everything?
No,
or did that change?
No. That's one of the things I think nobody tells you about is just how hard those first few, you're in a diaper, you've got the ice pack thing, I had a heating pack on my back, you're still bleeding, it's really uncomfortable, your nipples hurt. These are things that nobody told me about. The first few days were really, really, really hard. And I remember even when we went home, I remember my husband and I looking at each other why are they letting us go home with this baby? We have no idea what we're doing. We struggling to get him in the car seat. It's crazy. I've never felt so insecure in my life.
And they're like, and here, take care of this needy little being that you've never done before. It's really wild. Did you feel overwhelmed by it?
Very, very overwhelmed. Also, hormonal, emotional, crying, not sleeping. And then when we got home, I had 2 days with Cutter and my mom, and then they both had to leave. So then I had a baby nurse come because I was alone.
Oh my God.
And thank God for her.
What was that like? Having
really
your
hard.
Mom and your husband leave?
Really, really hard. Really hard. he had to go finish his season. My mom had to go home because my oldest brother had his engagement party, and it was just, terrible timing of it. But it was, it was sad. My friends kept coming to check on me, but between the baby nurse that I had had and my lactation specialist, those were like my two angels during that time, because I was also really hell-bent on breastfeeding. I was like, I'm going to do this. I've got this. And it was probably one of the harder parts of early motherhood. I don't think also anybody really talks about how hard breastfeeding is, how stressful it is, how many ounces are they gaining? Like they're constantly weighing the baby. He's not gaining enough weight. Then you feel insecure. You're eating a million lactation cookies. I ended up getting mastitis 3 times in the first few months of nursing him. One to the point where I went septic. It got so bad I had to go to the hospital for 5 days. And and at that point, my husband was like, Jamie, can you please be done with breastfeeding? Like, this has been the worst thing I've ever seen you go through. You're killing yourself. And even my pediatrician, everyone was like, just give him formula. It's okay. I felt like such a failure that I wasn't able to nurse him. And I think there's all this pressure, like, that's the best way to feed your baby. I wish I was able to talk about it more with people that, was able my second time around, because gosh, these mothers put so much pressure on themselves around breastfeeding, and sometimes it's just not easy, and that's okay.
I remember leaving the pediatrician after one of those 1,000 times that he was weighed in and bursting into tears, because it was like, I'm going to have to supplement with formula. And it was like, my body should know what to do, and I'm failing him. And this is how I literally keep him alive. But so when you had mastitis and you were septic, you had to go to the hospital. I imagine you couldn't bring Beau with you.
No, it was crazy. So we had gone out our very first night. We were gone out to this birthday party. I'd left him home with a babysitter.
How many months was he at this point?
3.5, very early. And I remember my boobs, I pumped before I left, and then my boobs started feeling rock hard. I went to the bathroom in the party, and I was trying to express them into the sink, and nothing was coming out. And then I started to feel like I was getting a temperature, started getting shaky. And I said to Cutter, I was like, we got to go home. We came home. I tried to nurse him. Nothing was really coming out. But at that point, he wasn't really neat. He was ready to kind of sleep through the night. And I woke up in the middle of the night in the worst body ache, shaking, fever, and I couldn't move. I couldn't even pick him up. So Cutter called 911. They took me to the hospital, and they were like, you have mastitis really, really bad, and you've gone septic. I ignored it, I think, for a couple of days and enough time where I just,
right.
I tried to power through it. And I think that it being my third time, clearly it just wasn't working out, and I was being stubborn.
Wow. I mean, that can be life-threatening.
Completely.
That's really, really
Completely.
serious.
And then I had to be away from my baby for 5 days, which was so hard. We had to have my best friend meet us because we couldn't take him in because he was so small. At 3 a.m, she met us and took him home for us. It was terrible. It was terrible, terrible, terrible. Then when I got home and just being able to feed him the bottle and kind of get in a routine, finally,
Yeah.
I was able to realize what I was doing before wasn't working despite my best efforts. And I just wish I gave myself more grace and an opportunity to just be okay, he's going to get formula, and that's okay. I'm not a bad mom because he needs formula.
And where in the timeline with your pregnancies and your kids did you decide to speak openly about your MS?
So when Beau was about 2.5 years old, Cutter and I were actually going to be getting married finally. And I think it was a combination of things. He was getting to an age where he was very aware of my limitations. He didn't necessarily know I had something called MS, but he knew that there were things that I could and couldn't do. And it was also getting harder to hide. I was tired of making excuses, and there was a big part of me that was just kind of wanting to step away from this business so that I wouldn't have to lie anymore. But that would also mean sacrificing what I do and what I love. And my brother had passed away during that time as well. And he was such a big part of my life. And he was somebody that, was such a cheerleader for me. And he would always say to me, like, I don't understand why you keep this a secret. I don't understand why you're hurting yourself. Like, we love you. You're great. You've got this. So I think it was all of those things, but, primarily with Beau, because here I am as his mom trying to tell him that you can do anything you ever want.
Yeah.
And, what makes you unique is special, and you should never be ashamed of anything. And then I'm going to ask him to lie for me or keep a secret. And so coming up on this big moment in my life, this celebratory moment after having gone through so much, I thought this time, if any, is the time to do it. I want to come out in a moment where I'm living life. I'm moving forward with my life. I've had this for a really long time, but here's the truth. And I really didn't know what my life would look like after, but I was ready to see that, because I also felt so comfortable and settled, like, with my family and my support system, that I was confident enough to kind of allow myself to, be fully who I am. I remember I woke up the morning knowing that People was going to be putting the story out. And I remember just kind of shaking. And when you hold a secret for so many years, not thinking it's like any big deal to anybody in the world, but like to me it was, to hold a secret for that long and now everybody knows it, it's really scary. I felt really vulnerable. I felt really exposed. It wasn't so much even how people were going to react. It was just like, this was my life before, now this is going to be my life after. Like, I don't know how to be in the world now that everybody knows what I'm dealing with. I was really nervous. And I remember my husband saying, I've got Beau, just stay in bed. I want you to take a minute, read the internet or don't, but like, take your time. And I just remember just kind of reading my Instagram and Twitter and all the comments, and just felt, and the text messages from people that are close to me that didn't know.
Yeah.
And from friends, just the amount of support was amazing. But then leaving the house the next couple of days, there was paparazzi everywhere. Like, I'm not somebody who normally has paparazzi following me, but because now, and just feeling like, oh God, they're watching how I'm walking now. Like, now everybody knows why. I think was a reckoning for me, but it was also an opportunity for me to kind of really start down this road of self-acceptance, which I've never had. Like, if I'm putting this out there, I've got to fully accept who I am. And that means how I move and what I look like. And so I'm still on that road. I'm still learning to accept it every day. But I think I've realized that, like, I see it more than everybody else does.
Did you always want to have more than one baby?
Yes, I definitely wanted to always have more than one. I think growing up with siblings, like, nobody understands your family or your life better than your siblings. So I always definitely wanted to give Beau a sibling. But I will admit that I had a little bit of like disappointment at first when I found out that I was having another boy. For a plethora of reasons, I'm sure, but I don't know why. I mean, I guess just being honest about it, I really was hoping it was going to be a girl to have that experience. But obviously having Jack here, I mean, I can't imagine any other human being part of my life.
And so were you and Cutter trying, or was it a surprise again when you got pregnant?
Yes. For this time we were trying, because I had to be more specific, to be off medication for a certain amount of time and to plan all of that. So yes, we were definitely more deliberate, and again, very grateful that it came easy even the second time around for us.
I think I had read that when you found out you were pregnant with Jack, you took 5 pregnancy tests because you were in disbelief. Why did you not believe it after? I can imagine 2 pregnancy tests, but 5? That's crazy.
Well, it was my first time trying to conceive. So it was hard for me to believe. And 2 weeks prior to that, I thought I got my period. I guess it was the spotting that sometimes can
Implantation
happen.
bleeding. Yeah.
Exactly. But I assumed it was my period. And I was actually in Israel at the time on a trip with some of my best friends, and was drinking wine, having a great time, just assumed that I wasn't pregnant. So when I came home and my mom was like, my boobs hurt. Like they're a little big, but I just had my period. She's like, oh, I think you should try again. And when it came out positive, I was like, no. So I went and bought like every type of test.
Of course.
Just to make sure. And I couldn't believe it.
I love this idea of you just going like, you're like, 4 is not enough. I need one more, a different brand to say. Yeah, let me just make sure.
I feel like if it's 5, then it's for sure.
You said that with Beau, the pregnancy was great. You felt physically better and less so with your pregnancy with Jack. So tell me about those 9 or 10 months. How were you feeling emotionally and physically?
Yeah, well, I gained more weight with Jack. So I think I was definitely slowed down a bit more. But yeah, I had a toddler. I had a 3.5-year-old. So I was, having to take care of him and run around with him. And so it was just a different experience. I think I was a little disappointed that I assumed I was going to feel like the relief that I felt the first time around. And so when I didn't, I was a little disappointed, but it goes by so fast. And it went by a lot faster the second time than it did the first time.
And did you have a similar birth plan that you wanted to do it with low intervention, vaginal?
Yep, same thing, same birth plan.
So tell me about the day leading up to his birth. Were you induced again?
I was induced again because he was also almost a 10-pound baby. And I was having contractions, but same thing, like my cervix wasn't kind of reacting as much as my contractions were and everything. So it was induced again, called my same team, my friends. Cutter was a little bit better this time.
Did you have the same 2 best friends, like one at each leg again?
Same 2 best friends, and then 2 extra that were out of town the first time that were now in the town this time. Cutter was definitely a little bit better. The only thing we didn't have was our moms this time. My mom was going to fly in after.
And was it a party again?
It was a full-on party. It was a full-on party. We were there to have a good time. We were ready to meet Jack. I called the nurse in and I was like, I think he's coming. She's like, okay, honey, I don't think it's all right. Let me just look. And she looked, she's like, oh yeah, his head's coming out right now. And I was like,
oh my God, so it was fast.
Yeah. So thank God my doctor was right next door. As soon as she came in, she's like, give a push. And I did, and out he came.
Wow, what a difference from 3 hours of pushing.
Oh my God, yes.
And so tell me about the moment that they handed him to you.
It was just, all I kept saying was, who are you? Who are you? He looked exactly like Beau. Like everyone kept calling him Beau 2.0. They're like, Jamie, your genes are so strong, blah, blah, blah. But then a couple of weeks later, he is blonde, blue eye, looks nothing like me. He's a clone of my husband, and Beau is a clone of me. So funny. It's so funny. But yeah, he's a different baby and was since day one, a lot more vocal. He feels things a lot more. He's just a lot like a big ball of energy and has been, like I said, since day one. So he's been another lesson to me in patience and in understanding, like I thought I had it and I was ready to kind of mother the way I did with Beau, and he's a different guy and he requires different things from me.
And tell me about that postpartum time with Jack and how it was different from your time with Beau.
Actually, postpartum was a little bit easier with Jack. Not that I knew that was what was coming. I just knew to be more graceful with myself. I had a different set of issues. I had like a weird rash reaction, a lot of like weird different things, but oddly breastfeeding for Jack was no problem the second time around. Like
Did you consider not breastfeeding at all because of 3 rounds of mastitis?
Yeah. I remember Cutter had actually said to me, he's like, I need you to promise me something. If in the first few weeks, this is hard, I'm not letting you do it. Like, I'm not. And I was like, yes, we already had like 4 different types of formula prepared in the cupboard. Like, I'm totally understand. I will not do that again. But it came so easy with Jack. I mean, he was 16 pounds by 3.5 weeks.
Did you feel like amazing? I felt like every time my baby gained an ounce, I was like, I did that. That's my body.
When he gained 4 pounds in like 2 weeks, I was like, oh, I'm killing it. Like it was the best.
Yeah.
And he was my big boy. And it just felt it felt so great. But then I had to stop on 4 months to go back on my MS medication. And that was really hard for me because I'm like, I'm things are finally like going smoothly. Like it's all happening the way it needs to. And of course, like something's got to come in to like halt it.
I'm learning that that's motherhood for you. You're like, I've got it. I figured it out, whether it's like nursing or sleeping or solid foods. And then it's like, nope, everything changes constantly.
Correct. I was going to say, but that's just life now. So I've just got to, I've got to surrender to it.
I love that. So one of the reasons that I wanted to do this podcast was to destigmatize, topics and really like open up conversations that don't happen enough. So I'm curious what you would tell other women, whether they have MS, are going through something or have some physical situation where they've been told like this might be harder for you. Like pregnancy, delivery, motherhood is hard, but you might have an even harder time. What advice or what would you share with them?
When you live with a disease or you live something that you think makes you different, it can be really isolating and you can be really hard on yourself. You can set yourself up with the idea of it being so much harder. But I want to tell you that within my journey of accepting this and being honest about it and being vulnerable, what I have come to find is that everybody is dealing with something extra. Everybody has another hurdle to climb. You're not alone. I think the more that you reach out, this is not something that's meant to be done alone. Motherhood is, you're meant to have a village, and whether that village is your best friends, whether that's people you meet online in a Facebook group, whatever it is, it doesn't make you less of a mom, and it never will. And that there's many ways to go around any limitation that you might have, but that you're not alone. And like I said, we all have something, but being a mom and loving your kids is more than enough.
Jamie, I love that so much. That's really beautiful. This was so wonderful. Thank you for giving us so much time. I loved this conversation. It was really,
I love
really
having
great.
conversations like this because I'm so happy you're doing this because I think
me too.
I think it's our generation, right? Is finally just really being open and honest about motherhood. And that's so important.
It's so interesting because I talk to a lot of women our age and they say the same thing. Like no one prepared me for fill in the blank, like how hard nursing was, postpartum, that I'd be wearing a diaper, that leaving the hospital would be so hard, that it would be hard to conceive, or that pregnancy was hard. And I feel like, how is it possible that so many people go through this and we're so open about so many other things?
Yes.
And yet we're all surprised when these things happen. So
Yes.
I feel like there's no reason to keep these things a secret. And I really am hoping that these conversations will help other women who are thinking about it or who have already gone through it. So I'm so glad we had the chance to talk. This was
Me
really
too.
great.